I don't know if I need a new mic because the AirPods now I'm using, um, like when I join it on Discord on the phone, it sounds like shit, but I'm using the same mic I am now, and Nika said it sounds fine. I don't know if it sounds good for you guys or not.
Sounds better than Discord.
Yeah, so all right, if you go to Swing Ideas and you go to my Rocket Lab play, right? I had if I do the replay tool, okay. And this is what it kind of looked like when I sent it to the chat. And a nice practice when going into shorts is you want to short off of something. You want to always short, or you don't want to short, you don't want to short the hole. You don't want to short. You don't want to catch a falling knife. You want to play deflections. The only thing that Rock Lab didn't have was a node to the upside to play a deflection off of. Even though it had, um, this is the king node to the downside at 46, and there's one at like 45. You always want to short off of something to target that. You don't want to short this down because if you short down and you get a bounce here, your cons are like -40, -50%. And then if you do get a rejection, you have to hold down, you have to hold through like -50% drawback, which yeah, if you size for zero would work, but if you're going heavy, you don't want to see -5,000, -6,000, -7,000 in your play. So what I noticed was, right here for this day here, we kind of held we held the support at 55. Um, hold on, someone's asking for the Zoom link, even though it's in announcements.
I'll send it.
Um, so I
I
noticed from a
just
couple of
just
days,
sent it.
I noticed from a couple of days ago that you had this kind of area here that was acting as a major support, and we kind of broke below it. So I kind of marked that line, and even in this area here, we kind of used it as resistance. So I was kind of looking for, a short off of this to kind of catch a downside move. Um, and if we play it out, I mean, it ended up being literally like top fucking tick to the bone. Um, up here, kind of sideways, it's sideways chopped against the resistance, and there was also, a node forming, I think, a little bit higher on the map if you replay it. But I got some PMs about that. They're like, oh, I didn't go into the short because there was a node at, 59 or whatever number it was that was growing volume. And I said, okay, if there's a node here, and a node up here, are you going to eye this node if you're at a gatekeeper node? We always say the gatekeeper nodes, kind of block price from going forward or going up to the higher node. So even though we didn't have a node at 55, we always say TA comes first. So this 55 here acted as a gatekeeper to the upside node. Um, we kind of rejected that 55 node, and kind of like when we were over here, that node on the upside started like dying out really quick. So if you bought puts off my TA off 55, this was like I think it was an 8% move downwards, which paid out people 200, 300%, and was actually a banger play. And the reason why I was looking at this stock for puts was because those downside moves. I mean, those downside nodes. That automatically gave me conviction that Rocket Lab would be a short play. If we ended up breaking 55 and pushing higher, I probably would just not even looking at it anymore, and I turned to my bullish setups. My bullish setups. So that was kind of the Rocket Lab play. I mean, it's not really, anything crazy. I mean, maximum I had, or maximum I actually needed was, literally one line. If you go to my swing ideas, it was literally just a one line play. It was a line at 55. I was hoping for rejection off that. I kind of got lucky or just really good TA. Um, we hit that exactly where I thought it would. and we rejected right down to where, I also thought it would too, which is at 50. Um, but I also do think that this could be a potential play for tomorrow because the king node is actually still at this green line here. And I told you guys all day, watch out for that 50 level. If I go to like a higher time frame, which we can see like here was a major level. Here too, we kind of hit it and rejected. Here we kind of hit it and rejected and fell lower. So every time we hit it below, we always fell down. So that's where we're at now. So I'm kind of hoping, maybe tomorrow it'll probably look something like this where I think I draw a line. Hold on. Move this over. We kind of come down a little bit, retest that 50 point, and then drop lower. You always want to play the deflections of either supports, resistances, or these nodes that we have. So we are breaking below 50 now. So this is just going to be something that I eye for tomorrow. Microsoft also is a great play of ours. I delete this and kind of clean it up a little bit. 0515 king node we're targeting here. 500 is a big psychological levels. You always want to mark your big psych levels on stocks, which is your 500s, your 510s, your 520s, your 400, 300, 200. Those will always act as supports or resistances for stocks. And that was kind of what happened with Microsoft here. I marked my 500 level and off TA. I mean, if you go to like the 30-minute or if you go to the 30-minute candle here, you see this big wick right here. That kind of means that there's a lot of buyers here at this level that are stepping in to buy this stock at this price. So I noticed that and I flipped to the 15-minute, which also looked really good. And I let it play out just a little bit to see what would happen. Once I saw kind of this area here, I think it was this candle exactly right here. That's when I mentioned like, hey, start going into calls. We're clearly bouncing off this 500 level here. And with the market with SPX and SPY and QQQs going up, it was a no-brainer call play. And then we just started skyrocketing. And I think here, it was right here or here we hit, I think it was here, we hit like 55%. I kind of took my, kind of gains over here a little bit. And then I'm going, I think, like 140%. I think if you play it out, and just kept riding the EMAs all the way up till the end of the day. So that was that play there that I played. I think another play I played this morning was Carvana. I replay this too. This is Carvana. I had marked the 320 level and I had marked the 330 level. So once again, major psychological levels, your 310s, your 320s, your 330s, etc. You always want to kind of mark those levels. If you mark your 320 here, you can tell that we kind of used it as resistance here, broke above, used it as support, came back down, used it as support again. And I think this is tomorrow. I mean, this is yesterday. So over here was kind of where I bought calls. I was a little bit late on the 320, but 340 was gaining volume all day. So I knew we were kind of having trouble at this 330, but I kind of risked it and kept, all my cons because I thought that we were going to break this 330 level to push the 340 based on the replay tool. When 340, even though we're at a resistance, is gaining volume, it's worth it to swing a couple contracts. And, it's great risk reward. You have an upside node growing in volume all day, even until the end of the day. That's a great play for calls. So if I end up replaying this now, we pretty much just gapped up, and I sold around here, I think for like 85, 90%. So that was another one of my plays that I took. I also sent that out too. And that's where also a lot of people um, played rejections off this 330 node. So we kind of overshot it a little bit. And if you look here too, right off the bat, I'm noticing is this candle here. This candle is a great indication that we're going to start going down. We came above 340, went to about 345. And then if you go to the 15-minute, this right here, you call a doji candle. This acts as an indication that we're going to go from a bullish movement to a bearish movement. So right when you saw this doji candle here in the 15-minute, you could have entered puts. And then I think this also went like 145% for some people. So I was tied up in Rocket Lab, so I wasn't able to catch this deflection. But this was also a great play for deflection off a king node. I played it up to it, and then there was no upside nodes above 340 that grew in volume. So I always mention this is one of the biggest things I say in the Discord. Um, when you want to short off a king node, you want to be going up into it. So we're coming up into the king node, and you want to see no nodes above that price or above that that spot price at 340. You want to see no nodes above it grow. If there's no nodes above it growing and we're coming up into 340, it's them too. So that was a great play that also people took too. I kind of noticed today that I kind of was a part of um, and called out this morning. So I don't know if there's any questions so far on that. What DTE contract usually typically plays in? Um, so since these are all end of the week targets, I usually play either this week's or next week's. Um, next week's if you want to be safer. This week's if you want to, risk a little bit more for more gain. What was the last thing you guys heard before I glitched out? Because I did get a um, no connection error. So what was the last thing you guys heard? Do you know? Anyone? The doji candle. I was pretty much mentioning to backtrack. When you're playing deflections off nodes, I always mention the chat. So like 340 was the king node for Carvana. Um, if you want to short off of nodes, off of king nodes and stuff like that, you want to be going up into it. So we're coming up into 340, and you want to see no nodes above 340 grow. Those are two indications if you're looking to short off of king node to look for. So you want to be coming up into price. So we're coming up into price, and there was no node above 340 growing in volume. And then that also tagged along with this candle here, which is a doji candle, which is also an indication that we're going to be going from a bullish movement to a bearish. Those three indications there are perfect indications to take shorts. And people did for 140%. And like I said, I wasn't because I was in Rocket Lab at the time, so I missed this trade. I kind of was in calls, exited, but I should have just stuck on the same stock and took puts, but you can't catch everything. So, all right, what time frames are used for drawing those support sources? Usually I go 4 hours. So I usually go the daily. I gotta delete all this shit I have written. Usually I go the daily to just kind of get a gist of like what's going on, and then I work backwards. So I'll go like 4 hour, 2 hour, 1 hour, 30 minute, and then 15 minute. I won't go less than 15 minutes on individual tickers. But to see the overall like supports and resistances, the 2 hour and the 4 hour are kind of perfect to kind of get a grasp of like how price reacts around these levels and stuff like that. So yeah, DTE. I usually go this week or next week because a lot of these plays, like when you're going off the first column on individual tickers, that's end of the week targets. There's no reason to buy a month out when these targets you're looking at are end of the week. So if you want to be riskier and risk more for better profits, you go this week expirations. If you want to be a little safer, you're going with like 20, 30, 40, 50K. You want to go either next week or 2 weeks out. So I think anything more than that is kind of just irrelevant. You're just rooting. The play can end up playing out in your favor. And if you're like a month out, you're getting 20% gains when I'm getting like 250%. Um, how long do you usually hold all your contracts before trimming? So I usually take a base trim at like 20%, but it also depends on, what kind of play you're taking and where you are and where there's support and resistance on your charts, So, oh, it's a good example of that. Like Rocket Lab, you know, if you entered here and you played this down, the next really like resistance we hit pretty much, or the next support we had on this is probably like this area here. So without hindsight being a factor, I probably would have played shorts here and I did actually take a lot of my contracts here. Um, and that's where I mentioned to you guys too, it's actually 52. It's like here. I took a lot of my contracts here because this was the next support. And that's where I mentioned too, where it's like, oh, hey, if we break below 52, you'll end up seeing lower and we'll see like 50. But we don't know if that's actually going to happen. Like, there's nothing telling us that we can just like bounce from here. Without hindsight playing a factor, you have to be prepared for every single scenario and case that could happen in the market. You can't hold a full position from here to here unless you're just ballsy and you just want to risk it and have some fun and gamble a little bit. A smart trader would short here. Notice that this area at 52, I think it was actually a node too, or it was a node that was forming. They would take probably like 50% of their cons here and then let the rest ride to 50 and probably sell another, 50% of that here at 50. I think if you're holding from here all the way and trying to target this 46, you're just absolutely mentally insane. I would never do that. But usually I do take a couple trims at 20%, and then I try to find where the next support is that we could potentially bounce at to sell more contracts. And so yeah, that's pretty much what I do there. What strike price do I usually go for? So this is another thing I tell people. Uh, example, like Microsoft, right? Microsoft's King node. So we entered Microsoft down here at 500. Microsoft's King node was at 515. I always tell people do not buy your strike for 515 or higher because there's a potential possibility that we never even reach that high, and you know it's just not safe, especially later on in the week because the stock can keep going up towards that strike. But if you're too far out and you're at like 530, 540, 535, your con's gonna get decayed so much, even with the stock moving up. So I think at 500, I think I took 505 calls and like 510 calls or 507.5, I forget, but like one of these strikes here. So I usually go about, I would say two to four strikes away from the current price we're at. Um, you never want to buy contracts for that golden node. You always want to buy it lower because if your strike's here and we end up going up, we're in the money. It moves a lot better when you're in the money. Um, it's a lot safer. And then if we end up hitting 515, we're even more in the money. So there's no negatives to doing that. If our strike was all the way up here, we could be potentially way too far out of the money, and especially later on in the week, like that would actually eat you up and like make your plays like bad, which I think happened to someone with RGTI. They went too far out of the money, and even with the stock price going up, they were still negative on their contracts because they didn't go, under the golden node. They didn't go a couple strikes out. They went like 8 strikes out and ended up losing a lot of money on that trade. So I never recommend buying strikes at the golden node or higher. I always recommend buying it, below that because at least you're in the money if we end up getting a push towards that golden node. How does put VIX uh, how does VIX play into the waiting game before taking a trade? Let me see this. I find myself waiting until they decide what they want to do. Yeah, so in my eyes, taking trades in the first 30 minutes when the market's going crazy is not the way to do it. Or maybe in the first like 45 minutes. I think Microsoft was a 300% plus play and it happened at 12. I think what was Carvana's time? Let's see. Carvana happened around 10:30. And what else did I do? Rocket Lab. Rocket Lab was also around like 10:30. So all these plays were after the first half hour of the market opening. Because if you were to enter Rocket Lab, you probably would have chased calls here and eaten alive and then, just lost everything. So it's good to let the first 30 minutes play out. If you're not already in this, there's no point in chasing it. Same with Carvana. If you're not already in this, like yeah, you could put, 5,000 in here and maybe make some money, but it's not always going to work out in this favor where you can scalp this move up. It's very, you want to wait, you want to be patient. If something's flying up like this, you always want to try to look for puts. Yeah, so TML, what you said is right. Can we talk about Meta's price action today? This one is pretty tricky. I bought an entry. I didn't even look at Meta today. Let's take a look together. All right, so this I did have charted. I think I put this on Twitter. I think it was like around here is when I charted it. So once again, I marked my 620 level here, which you could tell right here acted as support and over here too. And then I also marked my 634 level, which acted as a resistance here. So I think Meta had, at the time, it had a node to the upside and a node to the downside. So I didn't know which way we were going to go. That's fine. You don't have to predict. That's the thing about the market is you don't have to predict where things are going to go. You can react. So that's why I had an upside, upper arrow drawn here and a down arrow drawn here. I didn't know which way we're going to break, but you could have been prepared for any direction if you set alarms on my levels here. And let's just see how it played out because I didn't even look at Meta at all today. All right, so it looks like we kind of fell below it. So off my TA, with this break of 620 here, it broke to the downside. So after it broke here and kind of retested the 620 here, I would have bought puts right off this level here. And then I would have played it down, I would be trimming down here 20%, 30%, whatever it went. And this is a healthy $10 move down, even more, $11. Let's see, this one's pretty tricky. I have one entry from at 11:14, 620 calls at spot 612 off the bounce early in the morning. Where's that? I thought it was okay, but it ended up around 609. I got down to 607. Wait, so what time did you buy, Morris? What time did you buy the meta calls? At spot 612, like around here. Mid-morning, 9 a.m. Pacific time. That's about here. I mean, how much does this go here? Let me look at the map quick. Let's see what it looks like. All right, so um, I'm matching up the map right now on my phone. See, maps like Meta, if you go to Meta now, if you go to Meta at the time you bought your call, so around like that's about 12 Eastern time. I think these map like Meta's map was so dirty. Yeah, you had, 625 lit, 630, 635, 640 lit, but you can't ignore the downside nodes at 600, 602.5. You had your 610 node there. What did the Vex look like? All right, so it did have more upside, pull. Yeah, the lower nodes did stick around. So let me see if they even gained volume. I wish we could have this on the screen. 2.93. Well, I'm playing through the map now. Yeah, so it looked like 630, 625 lost its volume, but it looks like 630 gained it a little bit. But I mean, what's it at now after hours? 607. Let's see. I mean, the only thing about Meta is that I wouldn't even be looking for calls here solely based on the fact that we broke down past the major support. I think, this wouldn't even be, especially with that map kind of being dirty. If you compare that map to how Rocket Labs looked, you know, you can easily spot the difference. And I think that that's a big thing that people need to realize is that you need to find the cleanest maps. I looked at Meta last night, and I think I looked at it a little bit today, but I skipped right through it because Meta's map just had 30 nodes lit up. If there's 25, 10, 15 nodes lit up, I'm just skip right by it every time. You need to find the easiest maps to play because there's always a map out there that's way easier than the dirty map you're trying to play. Meta I didn't even look at, and we banged on Microsoft, we banged on Rocket Lab, we banged on Kavana. Those are very easy maps to play. And then you turn to Microsoft, there's 15 things lit up right now. So like even for tomorrow, this wouldn't even be something I play. You have 600 lit, 1.7K. You have 602 lit. You have 612 lit. You have 625 lit, 630 lit. It's just way too much going on that it's hard to predict what's going to happen because you don't know if, you know, those upside nodes start losing volume and we end up just dumping. Yeah, let's go like CMG for example. Let's take a look at that. Yeah. So if you go to Meta's map right now, right? For example, pull up Meta's map and then pull up CMG's map. You're telling me you're gonna dabble in Meta, but you're not gonna dabble in CMG? CMG has 32 and 31.5, like that's it. People play that today for 300%. There's way better opportunities out there than the dirty maps you're trying to force a trade on. Like this was literally easy. So this is right here is yesterday's Tuesday. All you had to do pretty much was just draw a line here. It doesn't have to be perfect. Or if you want, just draw a zone, which is it's easier to read price action and stuff like that and see if it supports holding off a zone rather than a line. But literally, look, we just held this here, and even this morning we just held that too, and then it was just blast off to the upper nodes. Yeah, 30 was floor. So if you just, drag this up a little bit, drag this like 29.8, like this is all you needed. This one zone was all you needed at this time. CMG's map was so clean, upside only. I mean, just hammer calls, and it was just easy from there. If you compare that map for CMG to Meta, you'll easily be able to tell why you're stuck in Meta or why Meta's struggling and why CMG went for 300%. You need to find the cleanest maps. I have my list I go through every night. I flip through every map. If a map's dirty, I don't even look at it. I just move on to the next one. All you need is one play all you need pretty much is one play every 3, 4 days to be profitable. If you played CMG that went 300%, that could have been your one play if you sized right for 2 weeks. You don't need to force a play every day, especially on a bad map. So even the Microsoft we played today, when I think went 300%. Like if you didn't play anything all week and just played this with like 5K, you're rich. You made 15K in a week. You need to start, not forcing bad maps and finding clean setups. I think that's what a lot of people are doing is that, there's they have like a love of fantasy with, a specific stock and they want to try to force a trade on it. And then I'm just losing money or forcing something that's just not easy to read. You need easy to read plays like CMG. Very easy to play. Literally, all you needed was one thing. You don't need 50 lines. You don't need, diagonal shit going on and all this stuff. I always say this too. Less is more. Let's see. This is under deck. I try to send maps usually, but obviously a bit bootleg. Yeah. So yeah, like this is meta, right? Like this just like what is this? I don't even know what this means. If I don't know what this means, I don't expect you to know what this means. You want to play the simplest maps possible out there. Like I don't even know what the fuck's going on here. Yeah, 625, 630, like that does look nice, but if you look at this now, are we really gonna hit 625 and 630? Why are we gonna hit 612 and just reject? Why isn't 602.5 gonna grow and 600 gonna grow and we're gonna go down? We don't know. We just don't know what's gonna happen off this. And then Nico, if you send CMG, that would like I don't know if people are looking at the maps when I say it, but I could pull that up too.
Yeah, let me start sending
Bootleg.
these.
Yeah, I can't show heat maps on my work laptop until I get a new one. Yeah, this is CMG here. Where are we going? We're going 31.5 over there with 32. Don't need a chart. Like, look at this one compared to this. If you can't look at the map and be like, all right, 31.5 is a gatekeeper. Over that, we're going 32. Oh, we're at 30. This big negative here, which I'm guessing in the morning was even bigger. We're at negative support here at 30. We have a magnet to the upside here at 31.5, 32. Buy off 30, target upside. You don't even need to look at the map. You don't even need to look at the chart. You don't even need trading view open. Here, I just don't know what the fuck's going on. Like I don't know. So you guys need to realize that you don't have to play those shitty maps and just find the easiest ones. Yeah, so 30 was definitely bigger in the morning. This one here is you. All right, you. Easy. No downside nodes past 40. We're above that king nodes. I would look for a bounce or a retest of 40. Hopefully get past 40.5 and see 41. We won't really see higher until one of these nodes over here grow in volume. Right there, bang, done, use done. Like it's that easy. You need to find the easiest maps. And the only reason why I would be looking for calls here is that below 40, there's nothing to target. And the fact that we're above 40, let's take a look at the chart now. All right, I guess we're not above 40 anymore. The map's wrong, but I would be eyeing this level here. Obviously, after hours, it's just going to change in the morning. But this zone here, let me turn this off. This is your 40 area. So it doesn't have to be exactly 40 if I get rid of this. It could be like 39, 70, like this area here. So I don't know what the map looked like throughout the day, but we're coming down into 40. You could look for a bounce off of it. So that could be a play there. This is not glitch, by the way. I don't know why everyone always messes this up. Let's see. I'm just going through all the comments. Let me scroll up. Yeah, double bottoms, tops, triple tops. That's stuff you want to play. All right, circle. I'll take a look at it. Let me clean up the map though. This is kind of what I had for it. This is outdated, but you can see over here with support. Over here with support. I did think we were gonna bounce. Um, this is like this TA is probably like 4 or 5 days old. Um, but even if I thought it was gonna bounce, I mean, if you zoom in here, this is 100 level right here. Once that broke, that's a big psychological level. Like I said, you want to mark your hundreds, your 120s, your 130s. I mean, once that broke, I mean, it was clear downside. And you can even see here, like I said, it doesn't have to be exactly 100. So even if, you were looking at this pre-market, you were looking at this yesterday, and you drew your zone at 100, you can see over here, we came up, retested it, and just fell. This is another easy play for short. You want to play off deflection of things. Yesterday, you could have noticed, all right, we're below 100 right now. Let's see what the map looks like quick. Because if there was downside, knows this was such an easy play for puts. I'm not sure. Let's see. All right. At 9:30 or before market open, there was a downside put at 95. So, for replay of this, it looks like I actually retested it pre-market. No, I'm looking at these things like real time, so bear with me here. All right, so it looks like pre-market. Actually, yesterday at close, there was a downside node at 95. So, I mean, you could have entered puts yesterday, and then this move pretty much happened pre-market. We came up, hit 100 at 6:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then, just rejected from there. Um, this would have been tough to play, I feel like. Let's see. Let me play through the replay. Yeah, right at open, you already kind of gap below 95. This play, I mean, would be really hard to play at open because you'd be chasing this completely unless you got in yesterday. Let's take a look at it now. I mean, now it does have a node at 90. The only thing that scares me about Circle is that it moves really weird. Um, so if you draw your node at 90, I mean, there's no floor. Like, where do you buy off of for calls, for example? Like, let's zoom out. And this is another like tough stock to trade because it's also just IPO'd. So you don't really have, much to work with down here. You only have this area here. So if I'm on the daily, I mean, I draw a line like around here, I guess. But other than that, I mean, there's not really much here to work with at these parts. I like how are you supposed to draw a support and resistance here? I mean, you could draw one at 90, but you mark your psychological levels, you could draw one at 80. So I mean, if you were looking for calls, I mean, it's tough. I mean, you have to try to buy it off 80 and try to point up. But the only thing that scares me is there's no floor. There's no established node as a floor. So there's nothing stopping this from going up, hitting 90, and just crashing lower. This is also a really tough stock to trade, in my opinion. I think if you catch the move, it pays really good, but I think being able to predict it is really tough. Like that and CoreWeave are like two tough stocks to trade, but they also pay very well if you catch them. Yeah, up actually insane. Let's see. So we interpret cell H's Jex versus Vex. I see a wider range for UpX week. Circle has been extremely painful game I've gone in when it was way back at 230, 180, 150. Yeah, like I've been trying to catch fucking like I've been trying to catch calls in the stock for a while. If you draw your line at 122, I think I mentioned once to buy calls off of it because if you look here, I mean you do have support, support. So I would have been like, all right, let me like buy calls here and see what happens. But once again, like this stock moves really weird, where it kind of curled up and just died. And then you could have tried to buy, if you look over here too, right? Support here. I'm like, all right, let me draw a line here. Like maybe we bounce here too. Scroll over. Oh, look, we're bouncing here also. Let me buy calls. Oh, die. Like it's just a very, very tough stock to kind of catch the knife on and kind of try to like determine a bottom. I mean, looking back, I mean, yeah, we came below it, came up, tested this exact area here. If you shorted off here, you would have banked, which would have been an amazing trade. But if you're looking for calls in this ticker, I think it's very tough. Like what's not stopping us from hitting 80, bouncing up and just dying again. I think it's a very, very tough stock to trade. I think I even have trouble, trading it. Um, so like that and CoreWeave, if you're trying to be consistent and trying to be a consistent trader and make good money, I think you should stay away from those two stocks, at least in the moment, because they're just, you know, market's going up days most of the time, and this is dying. So it's not really following the market sentiment, which is pretty tough to trade. Um, so yeah. So how do you judge when a map is going to move to a king node that day as opposed to the end of the week? Or do you just plan to buy a deflection, hold until expiration as long as nothing hasn't changed? So that's exact. So the question is, how do you judge when a map is going to move to a king node that day as opposed to end of week? Right. These maps we're seeing, this first column, are end of week targets. So 515, like for example, Microsoft, right? This is a first-hand example. Let's see, what day is this? This is all right. This was Monday. Right. I also did play this Monday for 70%. So on Monday we had 515 lit as a target for this week, right? Right up here. How are we supposed to know if it's going to hit 515 this day or our current day, like today, for example, we went from 500 to 511. The thing is, we don't know. You know, we can hope it hits on a Monday, 500 to 515 on a Monday, perfect. That map's done, we're good. Made money, let's short at 515 if there's no notes higher. The thing is, we don't know. I like we have no idea of knowing when it's going to do that. So, I saw us hitting here at 500 on Monday. 515 was lit. I entered calls here and we were making our way up. I was at 30%, 40%, 50%. I think over here I was at like 70%. I trimmed a lot of my contracts. Actually, I trimmed, I think, almost all of them at 70% because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know, what's stopping us from coming back down, a little bit up, down, and then just doing this all week. Oh, it's Friday. Oh, it's Thursday. All right, now let's go to 515. Or, we just do this all day, just chop all week. 515 fizzles out and we just die. We have no idea what's going to happen. So you always want to take your profits. You always want to, make your money, get in, get out. Don't swing, go to sleep happy, go to sleep up. Your account's green, everything's green on Robinhood, looks nice. You don't know what's going to happen because actually, if people bought calls here, this was Tuesday. People probably thought we're going to hit 515 on Tuesday. I think actually, what's her name? That Asian trader girl actually bought calls over here, thinking like, all right, like this is the day we actually go and hit 515. I'm gonna swing calls and I'm gonna bank. Next day, which is today, we actually went all the way down back to 500, retested 500. Her cons went like -50, -40, -30%, and she sold. But then look what happened after. We hit 500 again. We came back up. Now tomorrow we might actually hit 515. But do you want to be the trader who has $10,000 in this trade here? You're up to like 5, 10, 15%, and the next day you're down -45, -50%. You're down like 8K in a day. No, I would rather just, buy off this 500 level here, make 80%, sell out, not care what happens here, not care what happens here, not in a trade, not in a trade. Oh, look at that. We retested 500 again today. Go in. All right. 300%, sell out. Because we don't know if tomorrow, for example, we come back down to 500. We have no idea what's going to happen, you know. So that's why I say if you see green, take green. Just always take your profits. Maybe leave some runners. But to answer that question, do we know how do we know if it's going to hit that day or the end of the week? We just don't. If you bought on Monday, you would have probably swung calls thinking we're going to hit 515 on Tuesday. Oh, look at that, we didn't. Oh, you would have swung calls on Tuesday, think we hit 515, Wednesday. Oh, now you're down -60%. So it's just a lot of uncertainty throughout the week. This is from Monday. This is to Wednesday. This is the whole week of Microsoft with 515 lit and 500 support. We just don't know, what's going to happen. But the only thing I do know is that I would never be shorting Microsoft here with that 515 lit. So that upside node, same thing as Rocket Lab, right? Rocket Lab had those downside nodes lit. My thesis and my conviction on Rocket Lab is puts. It will always be puts as long as those nodes are there. I will never be looking to buy calls on it with those downside nodes. Same thing with Microsoft. I would never be looking to short Microsoft with that 515 node lit. There's no downside, no growing. There's no downside node lit up. My thesis and my conviction on Microsoft would never be puts. It would always be calls. So my question to myself would be, where's the best place to buy calls? And that best place is your big psychological level at 500. So I made my 70% here. Didn't really touch it here Tuesday, also because I didn't really have buying power. Then came in today, saying, "Oh, look, Microsoft's crashing. Let it crash. Let it crash. I'm not in it." Oh, hit 500, same time, same area we did Monday. All right, I'm putting 2,000, 3,000 in calls here. And then this was an easy 300% sell out. Take your 300%. Now if we crash tomorrow, sucks for everyone who swung calls. I'm 300% up. If it hits 515, congrats, you squeezed out like what, $4 extra. But you also risked stress overnight, knowing that your buying power, your five, four, $3,000 is in a two DTE play where anything can happen overnight. That just doesn't sound nice to me. So, take your profits and just, go to sleep happy. So that's kind of explain that. We just don't know what's going to happen. So just take your profits when you got it. And, just if you want to swing, sure. Just make sure it's, if you wake up tomorrow -85%, you're not, about to quit, about to leave the Discord and do all this shit and slam your computer. So I wish I had a port that could be down 8K in one day. Yeah, there's people fucking like winners with 30K in a SPX play overnight. It's insane. Um, we take on B. Yeah, so I actually think I had B charted. I mean, before today, because this is from yesterday, so it's Wednesday. I had something like this charted on B, um, in case we did bounce. Let me pull up the map now. All right, so BE, kind of what scared me was if you pull up the BE map now, there's no established yellow or purple node on the map for this week. So you have like 139 with -400,000 volume, right? we always say too, goes for a lot of the new people. If it's less than, if you look at BE right now and you look at 140 for next week, you see how it's 2,753. That's a solid node. You never want to play maps with nodes less than, four places. So if it's negative 400,000, it's not really a strong node. There's nothing, it it just doesn't really appetize me. So that's why I skipped by it, and that's why I didn't even look at it today. So you have no floor. So there's nothing stopping this from crashing. And you don't really have um, an upside node really that has a lot of pull. Like, yeah, you have that 140, but the same thing goes with the other question I just answered. What happens if you don't, like, how do you know if it's gonna hit? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? You don't know. That 140 is for next week. So technically you have 7 trading days for it to hit 140. If it just stays how it is now. You have no idea how the map's gonna move overnight and how it's gonna adjust. So I did kind of looked at that 139 and 140 node, and I kind of did draw something like this, where I noticed it's like an increasing kind of support. You're making higher lows. And I was actually, eyeing this potential play yesterday, but I did see other opportunities in the market for like Microsoft Carvana Rocket Lab that looked a lot better. You want to see bigger nodes for this week if you're trying to play like 2D2Es right now, or actually make your entries. So if I play this out, I mean, where do I think we're going from here? I mean, I drew this line here that's kind of acting as a support, lower highs. And what I'm noticing here is that we're actually coming up and retesting it. So if my TA is right, you can expect this to go down off this line here. Whether that's gonna be right or not, I have no idea. But like that 140 node is lit for next week, but that's also pretty sure is that OPEX week. We also don't know if it's gonna hit that 140 by next week. And 140 is right here. I mean, there's not really, it looks doable, 100%. But you have to realize that's next week's target, not this week. So there's nothing stopping this ticker, from going down, back up, down, and then finally hitting a 140 if the map um looks the same and stays consistent all the way till next week. Like there's just uncertainty here. You don't know what it's gonna do. You can only guess. Um, so that's kind of what like kind of led me away from BE. Was that there was no strong nodes for this week. If that yellow node for next week was at 140 this week, it would look a lot more appetizing. At least for a play like that you would want to take for, today or tomorrow. Um, yeah, so that's kind of what my take on BE is. When you say floor is a deep purple node with negative value, how is it different from having a yellow node with positive value? I mean, I think they both, in my, experience, I think they both kind of act the same as support. It's also what I'm seeing on BE here, actually, now that I draw it out. Hold on a second, I'll get back to your question. But you do have support here. Actually, resistance, sorry. You have resistance here too. Um, and then you have support here, and you have support here. So this can actually go either way now the more I think about it. And this yellow zone right here also lines up to 120. So this could be something that you could look at if you want to add longs with time for next week's contract, but you also might see a lot of drawdown because you could just chop around here. But if you want to add commons off 120, I think that could possibly work out. You would just have to see how we react, on a larger time frame here. I mean, if you go to the daily, I mean, you do have a long wick here, showing that buyers are present. For an options play, I mean, it doesn't really look appetizing just because that yellow node is for next week. But if you want to add shares off 120, I think that could possibly work. And I think you could see her push to 140 with time. It's just something I noticed now. But when you say floor, if you have a purple node floor, I think those are the best plays that I've personally played. Is a purple negative VE value as a floor and a yellow as a top. But if you look at the PDF, if Nico can correct me on this, I mean, I don't think it matters if it's purple or yellow. I think it could act as a support. I think what really matters is if the node above is gaining volume or whatever you're trying to play. If you're trying to play it as a support, if the node above is gaining volume, um, I think that's what matters. And if the node that you're trying to bounce off of is losing volume, I think that's great too when you're trying to play calls off of it. I don't think it matters. Nico, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. So yeah, I
If you
know
want to touch on that.
you know, we typically say that purple bouncing to yellow is a bit stronger, but end of the day, what matters the most is the level of volume that you're seeing on these nodes, right? So a high volume node, whether yellow or purple, is still going to be a good candidate to get a bounce off of, whether that's upwards or downwards. So please focus on volume first before you start sort of differentiating based on color. Oh, Giul, you have to, yeah, fuck. I forgot about this. This happened to me the other day when John was doing it. Let me see if I can figure out how to request that you unmute.
All right, can you hear me
Mute.
now?
Yeah. Okay. There you go.
Dude, that was
Yeah, my bad.
hilarious. I was like, yo, what the fuck's going on?
My bad. I forgot Zoom does that.
All right, I mean, I can go through some tickers that I think are going to be good setups for tomorrow. So I have my list. If you want to know the tickers that I look at, go to Insights, um, go to the pins, and it's pinned there. So I have all my favorite tickers I look at daily there. And what I do is, I can go to my favorites. So it goes alphabetical. So my first favorites are like Apple, ADBE, Affirm, AMAT, AMD, Amazon. And what I do is, before looking at the chart, I just flip through the maps and try to find the cleanest maps. So if I'm flipping through them now, which sucks you guys can't see, but if I'm flipping through them, I mean, right off the bat, I get to Amazon, right? Amazon has a golden node at 250. So what I'll do is I'll go to Amazon, see what's happening at Amazon. I look at Amazon, all right, you know, 250s are king node, but I noticed today we came up, tapped it, and rejected off of it. So this play doesn't really appetize me anymore because just based off the map, I thought we'd be pushing up to 250, and it looks like we already did that. So the map's already complete. There's nothing really left you can squeeze out at Amazon. I think if you looked at the map today, shorts off at 250 would have been perfect, that king node. But looks like, if you did that, you banked today. Yeah, I can't pull up maps. Using my work laptop and Skylit AI is blocked until I get a newer laptop. So you just have to follow along on your phone. So it looks like Amazon was a great play for shorts off the Kino at 250. So right off the bat, I'm skipping by Amazon. That map's already done. Next one's app. That kind of looks messy. If you look at apps map, you have 570 APP. You have 570 lit, you have 580 lit, you have 590 lit, you have 610 lit, 595, 615. Too messy for me. ARM's the next one. ARM doesn't really have any major nodes for this week past, 4 numbers. So I'm flipping by ARM. All right, I'm looking at ASTS now. ASTS looks interesting. The map looks clean. Let's see. You have a purple note at 65. So let me delete all my expired TA I had. So this is kind of what I had on ASTS. I think it had earnings that it missed. What day was this? Monday. Yeah, I'm not telling you where I work. Yeah, ASTS also doesn't really have big enough nodes. I mean, also, I mean, it has a purple note at 65. Like you could try to short, off a retest of 65 down, but the nodes aren't huge. This doesn't really look really appetizing to me. I also don't really like how ASTS moves. If you look at it for this week, I mean, do you guys really want to trade this price action here? I mean, it just doesn't really look smooth to me. So off that, I'm just gonna skip that one too. It's pretty much a game of, flipping through um all the maps that you have favorited and just finding the cleanest ones. Oh, let's see. All right. Next one I'm looking at here is crowd. So I gotta delete everything quick. Hold on. Since everything's just live. All right. So if you look at crowd, CRWD, you have a huge king node. Note all these nodes are a little bit lower in volume. So if I were to play this, it would be very light size, since I don't really like playing nodes like that with lower volume. But if you look at crowd, we have a king node at 545. So if I were going to draw that out, it would probably be like around here. Zones are the best way to visualize supports, resistances, stuff like that. Um, and we see below 545, there's no other major nodes. So right off the bat for crowd, I'm looking for calls because if this map stays the same tomorrow, there's no downside nodes past 545 that would make me want to think puts. So what am I also seeing here? I'm seeing that we are coming down into this king node at 545, right? Which is good if you want to try to play calls off a king node. Same as if you want to try short of a king node, you want to kind of come up towards it with no nodes above that king node to the upside to take shorts. We're coming down to 545. We see no nodes below 545. This would look good for calls. So what am I also noticing too? If we look at a technical analysis kind of standpoint here, you're seeing a nice long wick here on the 2 hour. So let's see how the 4 hour looks. Same thing, the 4 hour. Daily doesn't really tell us much. Yeah, but 4 hour and 2 hour, there's a long wick here. That shows that buyers are buying at this price here, which also helps me conviction wise that 545 is a potential bounce spot. So you could potentially eye crowd as a buy off 545. Now, the only thing that's scaring me is the next node above is 550, and then above that is 557. So if I just mark these out on the chart for you guys to see, and then 560. So right off the bat, I mean, we don't really care about these targets here. Why don't we really care about those? Because we need to get past this one first. So you always take the lowest target and you eye what happens there before eyeing the higher ones. Because what's stopping us from, once again, we don't know how it's going to act. We can come up here, hit this. Oh, you have 560 calls. You know, well, guess what? You're not making profit because we rejected it. But if you're buying, one strike out, if you're buying 550 calls, for example, rather than 560, you could potentially get in the money with a little bit of an overshoot here. So this is why playing closer to the price is important. Because here now you're at, 20, 30% at this point, for example. And then when's if you do end up crashing down, you took most of your cons at 25, 30%, 35%. and you let some runners go and they went negative, you overall left this trade positive. If you took 560 calls, even though we made this move up here and came down, your cons didn't really go green at all. You know, so I would eye this as a potential, push towards 550. If we can get over 550, we could potentially see 557, 560. It just depends how the map looks tomorrow. Maybe like maybe the 515 goes away and these grow. It's kind of hard to explain live what's going to happen. It's all assumptions. No one has a crystal ball. You just have to prepare for every kind of sort of scenario. But the one thing I am noticing on this one is that 545 is a king node. It looks like buyers are present here. If you go to like the 1 hour, it looks like we're kind of starting to bounce here. And there's no nodes past 545. So this potentially could be a play for calls. The only way I enter this play is if the 560 and 557 actually gain volume and we kind of break past that 550 level. So if you want to even be safe, you don't have to take calls yet until 550 breaks. If you want to try to scalp it, you could play this move instead. It just depends on what kind of move you want to. We don't know what crowd's going to give us. So you have to kind of just assume for the worst and go from there. So yeah, so crowd would be something where if you look over here, I usually how I chart too is I'll make sections for every day I'm looking. I'll keep my indexes up here, and then it's a little bit out. Like this is my whole pretty much chart here, which is every ticker in the insights pin tab. And what I'll do is like, oh, like I like crowd for calls, so I'll mark this green, and I make a section per the day. So tomorrow's Thursday, I'll drag that up for Thursday, and this will be something where I'll look at that map throughout the day and kind of just easily be able to keep tabs on it. And this is kind of how I split it up. So this pretty much would be like weekly watch list. So that's for like the whole week. So I'll on Monday or on Sunday, I'll go through all the charts, find the best maps, and put it in the weekly watch list. And then depending on what day it is, and if that map looks good, I'll just drag it up. So you have your indexes here in its own section. And then every day you have the best looking maps and best looking tickers in this area here. So that's kind of like how I, maneuver the market. Um, so I'm going to next, the couple stocks. Let's see. Let's take a look at quarterlies. Yeah, so Axon looks pretty clean map with a fat Barney note on it. So like Axon, like for example, right? I've never traded that in my life. But I'll take a look at it. But usually, let's see if it's low volume. Yeah, I do not like low volume tickers. It has a million volume. So a lot of tickers I have on my watch list and on like that list are tickers that I've traded before. I'm a firm believer in, you know, tickers have their own personalities, right? They move a specific way. They just react a different way than other tickers. I like trading stocks that I've traded before and I'm familiar with. Um, just because I have some sort of comfort with it. I know what's going on. I know how it moves. I've traded it before, and pretty much like a lot of tickers that people mention in the chat, like I just don't trade. I just don't look at them out. You don't need it. Like you only need if you copy my list every day. I guarantee my list gives you a solid A plus trade. All you need is one trade per day, even one trade per 3 days to be profitable and make great money. You don't need to force trades on Donut or DNut, whatever the fuck that ticker is, or Cakes, a ticker on Heat Seeker. Like I've never looked at those tickers ever. So you don't have to look at those. You can have my list, for example, and then every day check, find a great map, drag it up, and play that. The ticker, yes, I'm bashing Krispy Kreme fucking donuts. Like, what profitable trader, like who's actually a consistent profitable trader, trades fucking donut? Like, It just doesn't make any sense. Like Wingstop, I'm not fucking trading Wingstop. Like, why not? Why not?
Yo,
Why not? Why not just hit Microsoft up 500 for 300%, bro? Why am I trading fucking Wingstop?
yeah,
Literally trade Wingstop, bro. He's
uh,
capping. He says that
I'm
shit because
trolling,
he
bro.
knows I hate that stuff.
I'm trolling, bro. Now
Uh,
what I am muted
like,
to say I'm gonna make you host, so let me switch that over because I have to drop for one-on-ones in a few minutes. So
uh,
I'll leave you in charge. So
yeah,
just
great.
make sure you end the recording and all that. So
I'll
hopefully
figure out how to do
that.
it. I'm like a boomer, bro.
Oh no, but I'm
What?
recording on my computer. Okay, I'll just leave this running and then I'll run one-on-ones from my laptop. Um,
Uh,
because otherwise it'll cut the recording. But yeah, I
uh,
won't. I'll be in here. I just won't talk anymore. But yeah, I
uh,
thanks everyone for joining. Good luck, Jewel.
thanks. All right, so next map I go through, right? So it goes alphabetically. So next map I'm looking at is CoreWeave, if you guys want to pull it up. CoreWeave looks interesting because there's three kind of areas on this ticker, right? You have 80 as a king node. You have 80 as a node with 1.300 whatever volume. You have 85, which is king node right now at negative 1.6. And then above that, you have that 89, 90 area, right? So right off the bat, I'm like, all right, you have you have three nodes with great volume spread out. You have 80, 85, 90. You know, does it really interest me? I mean, if you wanted to play calls off 85, you're scalping a $5 move to 90 maximum. If you want to play puts below 85, you're scalping a $5 move to the downside. Does that really look appetizing? Is there a lot of meat on the bone? For me, no. But if I chart this up quick, you can easily tell, all right, this dotted line here is where the price is now. If you go back in time, you can see kind of this area here where we've kind of, bounced off of before. So what would I do? I'm going to grab the rectangle, drag this across, and kind of make this a support zone. This is how I do my TA really. And then I'm on a daily, by the way. I go daily, then 4, then 2, then 1 hour backwards. You don't really want to do much charting on for individual tickers on like the 5, 10, 3 minute, 15 minute, um, unless you're trying to go for an entry. On SPX SPY, all those tickers, like, yeah, you want to go on the 5, 10, 15 minute. For individual tickers, you want to catch a good move. You want to catch a 5, 10, $15 move on an individual ticker. If you're catching a spot at like a SPX 30, 40, $50 move, like you're asking for a lot. Yeah, it is possible, but on SPX, I feel like you're going for like $5 moves, $10 moves, $15 moves, $20 moves. Um, so you want to go a little bit lower in time for those. But here I'm noticing we have a node at 85, which right now is acting as a gatekeeper to 80. Right. In my eyes, is this appetizing? Like if you look here, if you wanted to short 85 to 80, you know, what would be your entry, right? It could be, below this wick here. But once you have confirmation, like a 15-minute close before below 84, like, all right, I want to take puts down to 80. Like, this is your move. Like, are you taking that trade with like 5, 10, 15, $20,000? Like that small little move here. So what interests me and something I would do is I would just drag this zone down a little bit more to 80. And what do I do instead of shorting from 85 to 80 is I would be looking at this zone here for calls off of it. So 85, so pretty much here off Giul analysis, right? 85 to 80, that small little move doesn't really interest me if I'm going in with 5, 15, $10,000 with two DTs like that. It's just so little of a move that You would have to exactly snipe past 85 or yeah, past 85, get lucky to actually hit the 80 target on the dot and get a $5 scalp to the downside. Like in a perfect world, like sure, that's a great trade, but your entry is probably going to be 84.30 and will probably end up hitting like 81.50 and bouncing. Like at that point, you're playing a $2 move on an individual ticker. It's just not worth it. So what I would do is I would look for this 85-80 area. If we hit 80 now and 90 is growing, now you have a $10 upside move as a play. So you kind of want to find the plays with the best risk to reward ratio. Um, so that's just kind of like a live like analysis of like how I would like look at something like the map of CoreWeave and kind of play it. Um, yeah, like Shark's saying, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to try to put $10,000 in a $2 short on an individual ticker because chances are your entry and exit isn't going to be perfect, and it's just not worth the risk to reward ratio. So if I go to the next map, I mean, next map on my list is Carvana, which I'll just delete everything. Let me take a look at this. Yes, the whole point of this is, kind of teaching you guys how I find my setups because I think that's the key. If you can find maps like I do with the best risk to reward and find my entry points and learn how I chart, you guys will all be successful. Um, Looking for calls and playing the versatile is appealing. Yes, it is. That, that would have more risk to reward for me than a $3 short downwards. I would rather play a $10, potential calls upwards off 80 or 81 or 82 to 90 than a $2 move to the downside. So yeah, the whole point of why I wanted to do this Zoom was kind of explain to you guys live my thought process and how I chart things. So Carvana, for example, is tough for me because in my eyes that map's already done. So if you mark, the thing is you want to when you look at these maps too, you want to see if the map already played out. And if it already played out, there is potential that the map could play out again. Kind of like what we saw in Microsoft off 500. It already tapped that Monday. We played that. It tapped 500 again. We played that again today. The thing is, 515 was never hit yet. So that gave me more conviction to go into that play again because that 515 king node was not tapped yet. So if we're looking at Carvana, for example, right? Um, Carvana had a king node at 340. So let's mark that. And support at 320, which would be this little. Did this map already play out? Yes. The map's already done. The map we hit 320 here, hit 340. This play could very well just be done. You know, we could just go like this all day, all week now. There's nothing stopping from Carvana from doing this because the map already played out how it was supposed to. Um, the only thing it didn't do yet was hit 340 and come down to 320. So if you're swinging putts, that would be okay. Could you play 320 off here back to 340? That is a potential play that could work out. Um, I would probably move this up maybe to Thursday and try to snipe calls off 320. But you have to remember again, this map already played out exactly how it was supposed to. And this is exactly where you hear Glitch say, you want to find fresh maps. You want to find fresh maps that haven't played out yet. And you'll like see him say that from time to time. Like the play's done, the map's done, the map's done, like find a fresh map, find a fresh map. This is what he means. This 320 340 already happened. This 340 to 320, if you're not in puts, is already going to happen again. So you miss the upside, you miss the downside, the map's done. Just move on to something that's fresh, that hasn't happened yet, and find that new clean setup. Because like I said, all you need is one map set up a day. And, that's what we're trying to find here. So let's keep going. So let's see. I'm just gonna go through some tickers I'm looking at. So like Google, for example. If you pull up Google's map, it looks really messy. You have 290, 287.5, 282, 280. So let me delete all this quick. I mean, 290 is here, and 287.5 is here, 282.5, this market here, and then 280 is here. I mean, this map like doesn't really look appetizing to me either. Because sure, yeah, you can hit, this 290 and then play puts down to like 280, for example. But what's stopping you from just hitting here instead and then here hitting here? We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know which node it's going to react, which node it's going to deflect off of or bounce off of, because there's four. There's two stacked on top, two stacked on bottom. So Google right now, I wouldn't really play just because it just doesn't have a far upside node to play or a far downside node to play. If you look at like again, CMG had two upside nodes so far away that it was a no-brainer. CMG, what else? Rocket Lab had two downside nodes to play so far away from the current price that hasn't hit yet. That was something to play too. Microsoft had a 515 node $15 away that hadn't hit yet. That's another thing to play. You don't really want to play these messy maps with all these nodes close to the spot price. You want to find the maps with the cleanest maps with the nodes that are the farthest away, but not too far out. If this king node was for Google was all the way at, up here, I mean, the odds of it going, 8% in a day or two is pretty slim. Sometimes people like send in maps where the target's like literally like 30% away from the current price. Like those just don't really, I mean, I'll keep an eye on them, but I'm not in calls here hoping we go all the way up here. It's just not, sometimes you have to factor in, common sense. Um, the odds of that happening, especially later on in the week, is so slim. So that's something to keep a lookout too. I mean, I'm gonna just keep flipping through my maps, at least try to find something. I mean, Hims is a good one. MDB, I'll take a look at too. Let me clean this all up. Give me a second. Everything's outdated because this is all live. How do you manage a play if the market is not following the trend? You're in a key area for an entry. Do you take your position anyways? Also, what if you are already in the play and it happens? Okay. Let me play if the market's not following the trend. If the market's not following the trend, so let's take a look at a live example. Let's take a look at, give me a second. I mean, I like taking all my plays if the market's following the trend. So for example, we look at Rocket Lab, right? I'm just gonna clean this all up and I'll probably just draw it out later on today. So I was actually looking at SPY around the same time we were taking Rocket Lab puts. So off 55 here, it's around 9:45, 10 in the morning. And I was looking for puts. So I went to SPY and let's see, 10:45. Let me try to see what time this happened. This happened 11:30 in the morning. So if so pretty much if the ticker is, so for example, right, this is what I'm looking at now. So Rocket Lab went down from 9:45 pretty much all day. 9:45. The big move was 9:45 to 11:45. SPY at the time was actually going up or starting to go up. It was kind of chopping here. I like personally taking plays that kind of follow the market trend, um, but also, tickers could just reverse the trend of the market. I think it's a little bit more riskier if you're trying to like short a ticker and SPY is making an all-time high. A great example of something I looked at too was this happened at around, let's say 12. Yeah, so when I was going into this Microsoft call, we didn't know if we end up just would break past 500 because what was scary was there was no downside node. 500 was never a node on heat map to buy off of. But what led me to conviction to go into calls here at around 11:45, 12 was that SPY here actually started climbing up. If you go to Qs too, so let me at 12 o'clock, let's say. If you go to Qs2 here, we're actually pushing a little bit higher in Qs. So I looked at SPY when I was taking Microsoft because 500 was never a support node on the map to see what the overall market was doing. And SPY was actually pushing up at the same exact time, around 12 o'clock, and Qs were pushing up too around 12 o'clock too, the same exact time that Microsoft was pushing up here. So looking at the like I used the trend of the market to enter this Microsoft call. Looking at Rocket Lab around 12, like didn't really go up at all here. Um, but I was also out of Rocket Lab a lot earlier, a little bit over here. Taking plays with the market trend following it is like just boosts the confidence in that trade. Um, Especially when you're working with like Mag 7, so you're working with like Apple, Nvidia, AMD, Microsoft, like all these major tickers, you kind of want to always like kind of see what the market's doing because you never want to try to buy calls when the market's dying. You know, that's where glitches like, oh, it's not buy the dip territory on these individual tickers because SPX is crashing or Qs is crashing. The best plays you can find using the market trend is seeing where the market could bounce and then seeing where individual tickers are on their charts to see if that lines up with the trend of the market bouncing. And like I said, I think a great example of that is Microsoft bouncing at 12, you know, SPX here bouncing at 12, Qs here bouncing at 12. They all started bouncing at the same time. Once SPX SPY Q started bouncing at 12, and I went to Microsoft and noticed that we were about starting to bounce off that 500, which is a major psychological level. I was like, all right, this is a no-brainer. Buy calls off this level, despite it not being a node here, and despite it not being a floor. Um, but I think if you're trying to enter a play, like puts, for example, when SPX and SPY and Qs are going up, I would probably decrease your position 100%. It's always easier to have your money in a trade where it's following the trend of the market. So I hope that kind of answered your question. And then you said, well, if you're already in a play and it happens, I would start setting stops. If I was in Microsoft and we were like more so, let's see, we were more so like here, and I flipped to Qs and SPX and they were just like legit going like this downwards, there's a pretty good chance that, Microsoft is going to start going like this and then come back to 500. And you don't want to sacrifice your 30, 40, 50% gains in that. So I would probably start setting stops or start trimming your contracts out. So yeah, if market's starting to reverse off if you're in calls, for example, if Microsoft and SPY and SPX and QQ are dying, you'd want to start trimming out because chances are eventually it's going to start dipping down and falling. I was actually looking at HIMS quick. So I think HIMS has pretty a good, clean map. HIMS has a node. HIMS has a major purple node at 38 and a yellow node at 37. So it's only $1 difference between those two nodes. So what I would do is, draw my zone from 38 to 37, which is this area here. And since we're coming down, into this area, if the upside at 42, which is at negative 1.9 right now, and there's also a little bit of volume at 41, if those start to grow and 35 starts to fade, note again, this is HEMS, and 35 starts to fade, I would look to buy longs off this zone here. Since you have same thing as the last example, you don't want to short from 38 to 37. You might as well conjoin those two as a major support zone and look to buy calls off of that. So this would be something that I'd be looking to play. If you also, so yeah, I would drag this up and kind of see what happens here. You don't want to rush into anything. You could probably even go to like the daily and see what happens there. I'm not doing MSTR. IONQ I'll take a look at. Another example of a shitty map. Everyone should pull up Hood right now. If you pull up Hood and you're playing Hood right now and options with 2 DTEs, you just want to lose money. Like you just hate money at that point. Like I don't even know what's going on with Hood. So if I was going through my maps every day, I would not be playing Hood. Even if Hood goes $30 upside or $30 downside, I'm not even gonna be mad at myself because looking at this map, there's no idea I would know what the fuck's going on. Let me see IONQ. I'll look at MBIS after this. All right. All right. IONQ does have a major node at 42. I'm gonna be in this area here. All right. So right now it's the IONQ. There's prior resistance there. Actually, you could probably even bring this down a little bit more. And then you want to mark your, psychological level at 50, which if you actually look here, we actually started to bounce off of it. I think you could, I'm guessing who wanted IONQ. Playbook. I'm guessing you're looking at this for puts, right? You want something. Yeah. So puts could work. You have far outside king node, but you also do have, 49 gatekeeping it. So if you zoom in the map, you're at 51, or right now 50.72. You have a node at 49, gatekeeping it to 42. So if I look at my TA, 49 is like around here, this level here. I mean, you could enter puts here at the break of the low of day, which is this 50 level. You want to always mark your psychological level. And if you just marked 50, you can tell right here we actually bounced off of it. You could attempt puts below that to 48, and then after that go lower. But you would want to see 49, that node at 49 start to diminish in value, and you want to see this 42 node start gaining volume. So what I would do here is I would play the replay tool. Um, this is also how I look at my plays too. If you're trying to eye a node, say at like 42 on IonQ, for example, play the replay tool throughout the day and see if that node actually gained or lost volume. If that node lost volume all day, the chances of us bouncing at 50 or this 49 area is really high. If that 42 node gained volume or was formed at the end of the day or something like that, there's a good chance that, this 50 level would break. And that's exactly how I use the replay tool to play Carvana. I'll come back to IonQ. But I noticed when we're stuck here at 330 or around this level here, I forget what let's see. Actually, it was here if I go to the shorter time frame. So we were stuck here, right? Looking back, what I do, I looked at this 340 node, which is the king node, at this area here. And I noticed this 340 node just gained volume all day. Looking back without hindsight, how are we going to know what happens here? We're struggling right now at 330. We could easily just reject and die. What gave me confidence to play calls and that confidence that we would break this level and push higher was the replay tool on the heat map that showed me this 340 node didn't lose any volume. It was just gaining it all day. That showed me there's a lot of volume here, a huge magnet here, and that this level here would end up breaking. And that's pretty much exactly, what happened. So a replay tool is a great way to, test your theories out, see what's happening at that node. If you're targeting a node that's just losing volume throughout the whole day, I mean, the chances of that node actually falling through is just very slim. But yeah, you said you replayed it and played it grew the whole day. Let me see. If you replay IO and Q right now, is it working for you? Because for some reason it's not for me. Oh wait, that's why it's and I'm done. It flipped to we're over 12, so it flipped to November 13th. Let me see. Yeah, so 42 went from 400K, 450K, 530K, 700K, and ended the day at 673K. So overall, it did actually gain volume. So that would lead me to, yeah, so Playbook's right. That 42 node was actually gaining volume throughout the whole day. So I would be looking at IONQ more so as a put play, just based off the map, because we don't know what's going to happen here at this level. If we end up bouncing and you were wrong, as long as 50 didn't break, you didn't enter this play. So it could fly, $30. You won't lose anything because it didn't trigger your entry. But right now, looking at this, I would mark it as a put play and just drag it up. Because out of these right now I have what? For example, 4 tickers that I'm looking at for tomorrow. All you need is one of them and one of your theories to follow through and end up making money. If I had a thought process for him that was going to bounce and end up crashing below this, I just don't play it. If IRNQ ends up bouncing off 50, like I don't play it. I flip through the maps and find the ticker that's actually playing out to what I thought it would. Um, and then eventually you'll catch a move like Rocket Lab where I thought it was going to reject at 55. It ended up doing that. I played that instead than all the other tickers I was wrong on. It's okay to definitely be wrong. Um, you can also probably just flip bias on ILNQ. If we open up tomorrow and we're at like 45 and 42 is just gone now, and 55's growing, 57's growing, you can just play calls. But right now, just based off what we have, the tool we have, and the analysis we have, I would wait for a break of 50 here and try to play that to the downside. So NBIS. All right, so what does NBIS say? NBIS has a node at 98, 90, and 95. So I usually go to the daily here, try to see what I can find. So I'll mark this here. Just mark your supports, mark there. Mark this area here, which actually was resistance here too. Now it's support there. And then flip here. All right, so it's saying that the highest you can go. So this is another example of, is it a clean setup, right? We don't know if we're gonna go to 90. We don't know if it's gonna go to 98. 98's right here. Right. This is where we're at right now. Do you want to play this move or not? I mean, there's no nodes past 98. So right now off, the tool we have, 98 is the maximum highest this ticker can go for this week, basing it off of the heat map. If you're looking for calls, I mean, you would need at least like a 15-minute close above this, you know, 95 area here, 94 area, right? Because you want to see it hold a support for at least 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, 30 minutes, right? By the time this candle closes, you might be at like, 96.45 before you get confirmation that this 94, 95 area is actually support. At that point, you're like here now. You're playing this move. In terms of if we're going to 90, I mean, you always want to mark your low of days, right? So the low of day is 91. So now we don't know if we're going to break this 91 here, this low of day, and continue down until we get a nice 15-minute close below this level. Once we get a 15-minute close below this level, you're only playing another $1.50, $2 move to the downside. So it's all about confirmations off your levels. And if, all right, we have a 15-minute close below here. Where's the next support? Where's this next heat seeker target? If this node here was, all the way down here at 80, all right, you wait below here. Maybe you get a retest, maybe wait 15 minutes, and then your play is that. The fact that these nodes are so tight, before you have to wait for a confirmation because what's stopping you from going to puts here, thinking you're going to hit, let's bring this down a little bit more, thinking you're going to hit this line, right? And then you end up being wrong. It was just a sweep of the lows, and then we go up to here. So it's all about confirmations and using the 15-minute candle, for example, as your confirmation that your bias or your conviction is going to play out right. NBIS also just moves really, really weird in my opinion. Um, yeah, I mean, there's not really left something. There's not really much here to work off of because you want to find nodes that have a lot of meat left on the bone. And that just looks too close to me. It's just not something that I would go in heavy with. But we can see what happens tomorrow, for example, on that. Let's see what else I can find. Try to find good tickers that have clean maps. MDB. Someone mentioned that. I just scrolled through it on my list. So, all right, MDB has a major purple node at 360. So if I draw that out, use a rectangle, right, to draw your supports. Because 360 doesn't always have to be on a dot of 360. Remember, these nodes are like plus minus $2, especially when you go higher in the price of the ticker. 360 can also be, 357. 360 can also be, 362. So that's where the chart comes in, where you can draw your zones and kind of visualize what 360 really is. And for me, this looks pretty much, this looks right. I mean, you have this area here. You have this area here. You also have this candlestick here too. So technically, you could drag this up a little bit more. And this also would be your 360 level, even though this right here is 364, you know. Um, so it's 360, and then you also have 355. So I would want to see, if I'm basing it off here, there's not really a ceiling, there's 400 for next week. But I would want to see kind of a nice candle close, maybe like an hour candle close off this zone to try to play to the upside. You also want to see 355 here diminish in volume if you're trying to play the 360 node. So it's hard to tell what exactly will happen tomorrow because, like, again, we can only assume and make assumptions based off, you know, the market and what we think is going to happen. So you would want to see 360 hold in volume, 355 start their decrease, and then you could play that to the upside. The only thing that scares me is that there's no ceiling, there's no upside node to target. So if I were to take this trade, I would size a little bit less than normal because there's no, think of the upside nodes as magnets, right? Like, yes, you have it 400 for next week, but that's also next week's target. We're getting very later in the week where there's no upside pull to drag this price up. I if this went like that, I doubt this would happen without an upside node for this week. You would probably be scalping a little bit more or less of a move unless a node to the upside forms and the map reshuffles. So that's kind of how I play this. I would probably also go a week out because now we're getting to a point as option traders, right? For Thursday, Friday, if you're playing 1 to 2 DTE, if you're wrong, you're gonna feel it. You're gonna go negative 60%, negative 70%, negative 80%. Like this is where it starts getting really dangerous. Like you have to be smart, you have to be on point, you have to be right. There's no room for mistakes if you go like 1 day out, 2 day out expiration. If you're trying to play something like this with no upside node for this week, and you only have that upside node for next week, go a week out, go 2 weeks out. Because if even if you chop around for a day or you chop around for a couple hours, you're losing so much money. Like a lot of these plays now, we're getting later into the week. If they don't happen fairly soon, you're gonna lose money. You're gonna lose a lot of money. So to stop that, go a week out, go 2 weeks out, and kind of play it like that. Especially you guys know how zero DTs are. If you're wrong, like you're just your port's gonna hurt. If you're right, you're gonna make a shit ton of money. But it just matters if you're right or wrong at the end of the day. But to stop that, like Fridays, you can always go a week out, 2 weeks out. So even if you are wrong, you're only negative 20, negative 30%. If you're right, you're 20, 30, 40% up. I would rather take the extra time and be safe and conserve my portfolio than trying to gamble it. Because I also say this too, the shitty days to trade, you're gonna wish you like you're gonna try to force a play on a shitty day and lose money. And then an easy ass fucking day will come out, like Microsoft L 500 today, where it was so easy, zero drawdown, instant profits, went 300%. You're gonna wish you never played that shitty day and lost money, and you just were patient and waited for a good day and played that instead with heavy buying power. So just keep that in mind. Just a lot of the A plus maps I play, there's always a downside node and always an upside. The only reason why Microsoft worked was because that big 500 psychological level and the market started bouncing at the same time it was hitting that huge level. So yeah, so that's that. Um, if you pull up Meta 2, for example, we already talked about that. Meta just has a bad map that I would not want to play. Um, next on the list is MP. MP had a king node I'm looking at right now at 62. So I'm guessing, this play is already done because we hit 62 today and we rejected off of it. There's not really a floor on this. So we could continue just dropping on MP off that 62 node. So if you want to play a continuation, this is where it starts getting difficult because there's two things MP can do, right? We already hit the 62 node. We already rejected it. There's no nodes above 62. So if you played this today, that was a great short on your end because once again, um, we came up over here, retested 62, no upside nodes past 62. So it would be a safe short. Remember, no nodes above the king node. You can short off of it. We saw the same thing with Carvana, right? So this off the bat was a great put play for today. Now we have 58 and 57 with negative purple nodes. We could, those could fuel more downside move, but we don't know if Carvana is going, we don't know if MP, sorry, is going to come back up, retest 62, which would be best case scenario. We get a retest of the king node and continue down. This is a great case, but we don't know if MP is going to do that. There's two things MP can do right here. We can come up, retest the king node again and reject if there's no upside nodes past 62, or tomorrow we just wake up and it gaps down. So how I play this is, since this is a kind of a clean map that I would keep an eye on. Note, see how it's already marked as red here? I would mark the low of day. The low of day of the previous day is always a level. Always mark your previous low of days and your previous high days. Those will help you with entries. So right off the bat, it's this 58 level here. I don't see any really local kind of supports or resistances around here. There is this level here, but you could potentially wait for a break of this previous low of day and short down. But you have to understand as traders, we just don't know what's going to happen with MP. We don't know if it's going to be a sweep of the lows and you try shorting this, right? Right here. And we end up coming all the way back up and retesting 62. So that's why waiting for 15-minute, closes under these levels, you see me say, wait 30 minutes above this level for calls, wait 30 minutes below this level here for puts. Um, the best play on this chart would be coming up here to 62 and then buying puts off of it. You could buy it below here, but it's a little bit more riskier. That wouldn't be really deflection. That would kind of be more of a continuation play, and you're kind of chasing puts. Glitch would want us to, try to see if we get a 62 retest again and buy puts off of that to the downside. So this is something that I would be eyeing. If we get a nice push to 62, I'd be putting this on my screen and just watching here if we reject this king node again. Even though it already happened, it's a possibility that it does happen again, which is always something to keep look for. But all right. All right, I'm gonna end the live just because my mic's about to die. but these are kind of things that like I kind of you always want to look at these charts, look at the clean maps, and kind of predict the possibilities of what could happen.